In the blinding storm, Daniel and Hunter stepped into what seemed like just another patrol night, only to walk straight into a nightmare. The wind screamed through the pine trees, carrying snowflakes sharp enough to sting skin like shards of glass. Norfolk was no stranger to cold, but the blizzard had turned the mountain town into a world drowned in white. Streets were buried, rooftops sagged under heavy snow, and the yellow streetlights flickered weakly, struggling against the storm. Inside his police SUV, Daniel cross-gripped the steering wheel, eyes shifting between the empty road and the quiet radio. At 36 he had grown used to nights like this, long hours, heavy silence, and a creeping sense of isolation. He had been trained to endure worse desert heat, ambushes, nights where every shadow could hide a rifle. But Northfall's silence was different. It wasn't calm. It was the kind of silence that carried warnings. In the passenger seat sat Hunter, his German Shepherd partner, 5 years old, and all focus. The dog's ears stood tall, eyes locked on the snowy world outside. Hunter didn't fidget, didn't yawn, didn't relax. He simply watched, muscles tense, as if the blizzard itself might lunge at them. Daniel glanced at him and smirked faintly. "You're sharper than I'll ever be," he muttered under his breath. Hunter gave a low growl, a sound that wasn't hostile but wasn't casual either, a sound that meant, "I'm listening. Stay alert." North Fork was small, barely a dot on the map, tucked into the Wyoming mountains near the Canadian border. Summers brought hikers and campers. Winters trapped the town in ice, cutting it off from highways and leaving it vulnerable to storms, vulnerable to predators, both animal and human. Daniel had seen it all. Drug runners, poachers, and, in the worst cases, people smuggling operations, moving women and children across the border. Tonight, though, his radio was silent. No calls, no alerts, just static fading in and out. For most offices, that would mean an easy shift. For Daniel, it meant something else. Quiet was never safe. Quiet was a warning. The SUV rolled slowly down the main street. The grocery store was dark, the gas station long since closed. Only the town's one bar still had lights, neon signs glowing weakly behind frosted glass. A few drunk locals staggered into the cold, cursing the wind. Daniel slowed, scanned their faces, then pressed on. Nothing worth stopping for. Soon he left the last lights of North Fork behind, turning onto the forest road that cut deeper into the mountains. The headlights carved tunnels through the blizzard, beams bouncing off snow-caked trees. The road was deserted, silent except for the howl of the storm. That was when Hunter stiffened. The dog's ears twitched. His nose pressed against the glass. A quiet growl rolled in his throat. Daniel frowned. "What is it?" Hunter didn't move. His entire body had gone still. Eyes fixed on the tree line, Daniel eased off the gas, letting the SUV crawl forward. Snow crunched under the tires, the sound loud in the emptiness. He pulled to the side of the road, shifted into park, and killed the engine. The silence was instant and deafening. He opened the door, cold air slamming into him like a wall. The wind clawed at his jacket, biting through the layers. But Daniel ignored it. He stepped out, boots sinking into fresh snow. With one hand, he pulled a flashlight from his belt. With the other, he rested his palm on the pistol at his hip. Hunter leaped out, paused, landing silently. The dog lowered his head, nose to the ground, then took a few steps forward. Tense and deliberate, Daniel followed, scanning the forest with his beam. Snowflakes whirled in the light, glittering like shards of broken glass. Pine trunks loomed tall and black against the white. Nothing moved, but he had learned long ago to trust Hunter. "What do you hear?" Daniel asked softly. Hunter growled again, low and steady, then turned his head toward the deeper woods. Daniel's breath misted in the air. His instincts screamed at him. Every step further from the SUV meant stepping further into uncertainty. He thought of Afghanistan, of nights when his squad crept through ruins, every corner a possible trap. The silence then felt just like this. He shined a light across the snow. Tracks. Small ones. Maybe a deer, maybe not. Hard to tell with the storm covering them. He swallowed. Options circled in his mind. Get back in the SUV and move on, or follow Hunter's lead. Every sensible thought said leave it. Every instinct as a cope and as a soldier said don't ignore it. Hunter turned back toward him, eyes sharp, tail stiff. The dog had made the choice for him. Daniel tightened his grip on the flashlight. "All right, partner," he whispered. "Let's see what's out there." Together, they stepped into the storm. The snow swallowed their footprints behind them, the wind burying every trace. The beam of light trembled across the woods. Each crunch of his boots echoed too loud, like a countdown to something unseen. The forest pressed closer, the cold thicker, the silence heavier. And in that silence, Daniel knew This night would not end like the others. Something waited ahead, something that would change everything. Hunter stopped so suddenly that Daniel almost stumbled into him. The shepherd's body went rigid, head lowered, teeth bared in a silent snarl, his ears pinned forward, focused on the dark wall of forest ahead. Then it came, a sound so faint that for a second Daniel thought the storm had played a trick on him. A weak, broken cry, not animal, human. The sound threaded through the blizzard, thin and desperate. Daniel's heart clenched hard against his ribs. "Jesus," he whispered. Hunter growled low, hackles bristling. He was torn between advancing and warning. Whatever lay ahead wasn't right. Daniel raised his flashlight. The beam shook across the trees, catching only trunks and snow. The cry came again, this time with a hitch, like someone struggling to breathe. He swallowed. Every instinct screamed caution. He was in near whiteout conditions. In the woods, with visibility no more than a few yards, could be a trap. Could be someone trying to lure him off the road. Smugglers had done worse. Traffickers used every cruel trick, but leaving someone to die out here, he couldn't. Daniel crouched beside Hunter, lowering his voice. "Stay sharp, buddy. We go slow." The shepherd flicked his eyes toward him, then back to the forest, a soft huff steaming in the cold. Agreement. They pressed deeper. The storm muffled everything, branches cracking under ice, the crunch of boots in snow. Daniel's beam danced over low bushes, half-buried logs, broken animal tracks. His breath came fast, fogging before his face. Then the light caught something metallic. At first it was just a glint, half buried in snow. But as Daniel stepped closer, the shape resolved. Steel jaws, rusted and brutal, a bear trap. His gut twisted, and inside it, a leg. The girl was curled against the tree, her dark hair matted with ice and snow. She couldn't have been more than 20, face pale, lips trembling blue. Her ankle was clamped in the trap, blood frozen around the steel. Every time she tried to move, a choked cry escaped her throat. "Help, please," her voice cracked, raw with cold and pain. Daniel's stomach turned. He had seen wounds like this before. Ugly, crushing injuries meant to hold, not kill quickly. She didn't have long. He dropped to one knee, setting the flashlight down so it shone across her leg. "Stay still, don't move." Her eyes fluttered open, wide with fear. "Are you police?" "Sheriff's Department," he said quickly. "Name's Daniel Cross. You're safe now." Her gaze flicked past him to Hunter. The shepherd stood stiff, still growling low, watching the tree. She flinched at the sound, then exhaled in relief when she saw Daniel's hand steady on the dog's shoulder. "My name," her voice broke as a shiver racked her body. "Lena. My name's Lena." "All right, Lena, listen to me. We're gonna get you out of this." But even as he said it, Daniel's mind raced. Bear traps were vicious, designed to snap shut with bone-breaking force. The steel jaws crushed muscle, cut circulation, left victims bleeding out or freezing where they fell. Opening one bare-handed was nearly impossible, and there was something worse, the sense that they weren't alone. Hunter hadn't eased for a second. His gaze kept cutting into the woods, ears twitching, a growl thrumming in his chest like an engine. Daniel's pulse hammered. The traffickers Lena had spoken of, were they close? Had they left her here to slow someone down or as bait? He scanned the trees, light flashing left to right. Nothing. No movement. Just snow, darkness, and silence. Then Lena whimpered, snapping his focus back. She clutched at the frozen steel nails, scraping helplessly. Blood welled where metal tore into her skin. "Stop." He reached forward, catching her wrists gently. "You'll just make it worse." Tears streaked her frozen cheeks. I can't feel my foot anymore." Daniel's jaw tightened. That was bad. She was losing blood and circulation. Minutes matted. He slipped his pack off his shoulder, pulling free a small pry bar. Not ideal. He'd used it to open stubborn locks. Never something like this, but it was all he had. He wedged it into the hinge of the trap, bracing himself. "Lena, this is gonna hurt a lot, but you have to stay still." Her eyes widened in panic. What if they come back?" "They won't touch you," Daniel said firmly. "Not while I'm here." Hunter barked once, sharp, as if agreeing. Daniel gritted his teeth and leaned his weight onto the bar. The trap groaned, metal straining but not budging. His glove slipped. He adjusted, pressed harder. Snow bit into his knees, cold burning through his jeans. "Come on," he hissed under his breath. "Come on." The steel gave the faintest shift, then locked again. Lena screamed, biting it off into sobs. "Hold on," Daniel muttered, trying again. He thought of his years overseas, the times when he'd had nothing but his hands and willpower to keep someone alive. This was no different. Couldn't be. He braced both arms, muscles burning, and forced the jaws apart inch by inch. Finally, with a screech of metal, the trap loosened enough for him to pull her leg free. The jaws snapped shut again as soon as he let go, the sound like gunfire in the stillness. Lena collapsed against the tree, gasping, her hands gripping snow like she was afraid she'd fall through it. Blood seeped through the shredded fabric of her pants, staining the white beneath her. Daniel dropped beside her, pulling gauze from his kit. He wrapped the wound tightly, fingers working fast despite the cold. "Stay with me. You're okay." She trembled violently. "They'll find me. They'll kill me." Daniel tied the bandage off, met her gaze. "Not tonight. Not while you're with me." But as he spoke, he couldn't shake the unease crawling through his chest. Hunter was still tense, still scanning the woods. Every instinct told him they were being watched. The storm howled louder, drowning the world in white. Daniel lifted Lena into his arms, her body light from exhaustion. She clutched his jacket weakly, her breath shallow against his chest. Hunter moved ahead, leading the way back toward the road. Daniel's boots crunched through the snow, every step heavy, every sound too loud. He didn't dare look back, afraid of what he might see lurking between the trees. The storm swallowed them, but he knew this night wasn't over, not by a long shot. Snow lashed across Daniel's face as he worked, the storm pressing in like a living thing. Every second felt stolen, as if time itself wanted to drag him into failure. Lena's muffled sobs bled into the wind, her body trembling violently against the cold. The trap didn't care. It was merciless steel, a predator that had already sunk its jaws deep into her flesh. Daniel planted his knees into the snow, boots slipping against the ice. The pry bar trembled in his grip, his arms straining as he tried to force the trap's jaws apart. It groaned, but only slightly. Mocking his effort, Hunter stood close, muscles rigid, a low growl vibrating in his chest. His eyes weren't on the trap, but the forest. Something out there had his full attention. "Not now," Daniel muttered through clenched teeth, as though speaking to the storm, to the trap, and maybe to the shadows pressing closer. He shoved the bar deeper into the hinge, metal screeching as he leaned with all his weight. The steel shifted, just a fraction but enough to send a jolt of hope through him. Lena cried out, the sound sharp and raw. Her hands clawed at the snow, gripping so tight her knuckles turned white. I can't." "Yes, you can," Daniel cut in, voice hard but steady. "Stay with me, Lena, just a little longer." He adjusted his footing, boots digging trenches into the snow. The storm made his gloves slick, his breath ragged with effort. The pry bar slipped once, clanging against the steel. He bit back a curse, shoved it in again. Hunter barked suddenly short, sharp, urgent. Daniel froze. Through the wind came another sound, distant, barely there, the crunch of footsteps on snow. His chest tightened. He glanced toward the tree line, the flashlight beam jerking across black trunks and swirling white. Nothing. But Hunter didn't bark without reason. The shepherd's growl deepened, his body angled toward the sound. They weren't alone. Daniel's mind split in two. Part of him screamed to draw his weapon, to prepare for the fight he knew was coming. The other half stayed locked on the trap, on the girl bleeding out in front of him. He couldn't do both. He had to choose. Lena's voice cut through his hesitation, weak, breaking. "Please don't leave me here." His jaw clenched. He forced his weight onto the pry bar again, muscles burning with the effort. The trap resisted, shrieking like something alive, then shifted wider. "Now," Daniel barked, grabbing Lena's leg. He yanked, pulling her shredded ankle free. The jaws snapped shut instantly, a brutal metallic clap that echoed through the storm. Daniel nearly lost his balance, catching himself in the snow. His gloves were wet now, sticky. He glanced down. Blood, it coated his fingers, already thickening in the cold, soaking into the snow around them. Lena gasped, curling in on herself. Her eyes rolled back for a moment before snapping open again. She clutched at her ankle, but her hands came away red. Daniel dropped the pry bar, tore open his kit, and pulled free bandages. He wrapped fast, pulling the gauze tight. Blood seeped through instantly, staining white to crimson. He added more, pressing hard, trying to stem the flow. Her face was ghostly pale, lips almost blue. She was losing too much, too fast. "Stay awake, Lena, look at me." He tapped her cheek gently. Her gaze fluttered, unfocused. "Don't you dare pass out." Hunter barked again, louder this time. The sound of footsteps was clearer now, deliberate, more than one set. Daniel's stomach dropped. "Damn it," he whispered. He tightened the last bandage, knotting it firm. "We're moving." He slid his arms under Lena, lifting her carefully. She was light, frighteningly so, her body limp except for the weak grip she found on his jacket. Her blood smeared against him, hot even in the bitter cold. Hunter circled once, ears straining toward the sound. then darted ahead, leading them back toward the road. His body was tense, every motion sharp and urgent. Daniel staggered forward, boots crunching in the snow, Lena's weight pressing against his chest. Each step felt like hauling both of them through quicksand. His flashlight beam cut narrow tunnels through the storm, barely enough to see a few yards ahead. Behind them, faint but undeniable, came voices, male, rough, speaking low, words muffled by the storm but carrying the cadence of men used to moving through the dark. Lena whimpered faintly against him. "They're coming." Daniel didn't answer. He adjusted his grip on her, jaw set hard. He knew. Hunter barked once, a warning, before darting ahead again. Daniel pushed harder, breath tearing at his throat. The SUV was out there. Safety was out there. But the forest seemed endless, each tree a shadow waiting to close in. His arms burned, blood from Lena's wounds soaking into his jacket. His mind screamed calculations. How much blood she'd last. How long she could last. How quickly they could reach the vehicle. A branch snapped behind them. Then another. Daniel stopped, turning his head just enough to glance over his shoulder. Through the storm, just beyond the reach of his light, shapes moved, dark against the white. Human. His heart slammed once. Hard. They had found her. "Move," Daniel growled, more to himself than anyone else. He pushed forward again, Hunter leading with unshakable purpose. The storm swallowed their trail, covering footprints almost as soon as they were made. But Daniel knew the men were close. He could feel it, like breath on the back of his neck. He tightened his hold on Lena. "Don't give up on me," he said, low and fierce. "We're not done yet." Her reply was a faint, broken whisper. "I'm trying," Hunter barked again, 3 sharp bursts this time. Urgent warning. Daniel's teeth ground together. Every decision cut like a blade. Stop and fight, or keep running. Stay alive or protect the girl in his arms. Every second he chose to move instead of draw his weapon. He gambled with their lives, but he'd made his choice the moment he freed her from the trap. Daniel lowered his head against the storm, Hunter guiding the way, Lena's life hanging on his determination. Behind them the voices grew louder. The night had only just begun. The first beam of light cut through the trees like a blade, a flashlight far behind but moving steadily toward them. Daniel's stomach turned to stone. The storm was bad enough, but now the night had a second predator. "Hunter," he muttered, shifting Lena's weight higher in his arms. The shepherd barked once, sharp, ears pinned to the direction of the lights. Lena stirred faintly, her head rolling against Daniel's shoulder. Her lips were pale, words breaking on a whisper. "They're here, I know." His voice was calm, steady, but his heart hammered like a drum. The crunch of boots carried faintly over the howl of the wind. Voices followed, low, guttural, men shouting to one another in bursts of rough cadence. Traffickers. There was no mistaking it. They moved with the precision of men who had done this before, who knew the forest, who didn't care about the storm. Daniel's jaw tightened. He'd seen their type on foreign soil. Organized, cruel, and relentless. He forced his legs to move faster. Snow rose to his shins, dragging him down with every step. But he pushed through, clutching Lena against him. Blood seeped from her wound, warm even through his jacket. Every drop she lost was a clock ticking down. Hunter trotted ahead, weaving back and forth, his nose close to the ground. Each bark was a direction, guiding Daniel through the storm-blinded forest. Without the dog, he might have circled back into danger. With him there was a path. Behind them, the lights multiplied. More beams danced between the trees, bobbing closer, cutting arcs through the snow. The voices grew louder. Daniel shifted Lena's weight again. She whimpered, her face pressed against his chest. "Don't let them take me, they won't," Daniel said through clenched teeth. "Not while I'm breathing." The forest opened briefly into a clearing. The storm tore across it, an endless wall of white that made his flashlight useless. He paused at the edge, scanning left and right, debating whether to cross or circle. Hunter didn't hesitate. He barked once and darted across. Pause, sinking deep but sure. Daniel followed. His boots plunged into the snow, legs burning with effort. Halfway across, he glanced back. The traffickers were at the tree line now, figures cloaked in heavy coats, flashlights slicing the blizzard into fragments. One raised an arm, pointing. Shouts erupted. Daniel cursed under his breath and pushed harder. Snow dragged him down, but adrenaline drove him forward. Hunter barked again from the far side of the clearing, urging him on. Gunfire cracked. A bullet hissed through the storm, snapping into a tree trunk to Daniel's left. Bark exploded, scattering against the snow. Lena gasped, clutching tighter to him. Daniel ducked, bending over her, using his body as a shield. Another shot rang out, muffled by the wind but close. The traffickers were firing blind, but blind shooting was still deadly in a storm this thick. "Keep your head down," he hissed to Lena. She buried her face into his jacket, trembling. Daniel pushed through the last stretch of the clearing, stumbling into the cover of the trees. Hunter waited there, growling, low eyes fixed back toward the gunfire. The traffickers' lights bobbed into the clearing, shouts carried through the storm, one voice louder, giving orders, organized, moving as a unit. Daniel pressed his back against a tree, catching his breath. His muscles screamed. His arms were going numb from carrying Lena, but he couldn't let go. Not here, not now. He looked down at her. Blood had already soaked through the bandages, staining his jacket and dripping into the snow. Every drop left a trail, bright red against white, a beacon leading straight to them. He swore under his breath. They were leaving a map for their pursuers. Hunter growled again, pulling his attention forward. The shepherd darted a few yards, then looked back, ears sharp. He'd found another path. "All right, lead the way," Daniel muttered. They moved again, deeper into the forest. Branches clawed at Daniel's shoulders, ice snapping under his boots. Lena's breathing was shallow, ragged, her body was limp, every bump making her wince. "Stay with me, Lena," he urged, voice low but firm. "We're almost out." Her reply was barely audible. "I don't want to die, you won't." He said it like a vow, even if doubt gnawed inside him. Behind them, voices echoed through the trees. The traffickers had entered the clearing. Their flashlights cut wide arcs, beams swinging left and right. Searching, Daniel could hear the leader barking orders again, sharper this time. They were spreading out, hunting. Hunter barked twice, quick and urgent. Daniel followed, pushing through a narrow cut between two frozen pines. The storm thickened here, it swirling so violently that even their footprints vanished within minutes. It was their only advantage, the blizzard itself. Still, blood on the snow worried him. No storm could erase that fast enough. They pressed on. Daniel's legs trembled from exhaustion, but he didn't slow. The SUV was out there, waiting. If he could just reach it, they had a chance. A chance. He stumbled, nearly dropping Lena as his boots sank into a hidden drift. Pain shot up his leg. He gritted his teeth, pulled free, and kept moving. Hunter stopped suddenly at the edge of another rise. His ears pricked, nose lifted. He growled low, then glanced back at Daniel, warning. Daniel crouched, shielding Lena with his body as he listened. Footsteps, closer now, crunching snow, breaking branches. The traffickers were gaining. He pulled his pistol free with his free hand, the weapon heavy but familiar. He didn't want to fight not carrying Lena, not in the storm, but if it came, he'd give them hell. Hunter snarled softly, his whole body tense. Daniel shifted Lena higher in his arms. "Almost there," he whispered, more to himself than to her. "Almost there." And with Hunter leading again, he plunged deeper into the storm, blood dripping into the snow behind them, mocking every desperate step. The SUV rattled as it cut through the snow-covered back road. Daniel's hands gripped the steering wheel tight, every bump and slide reminding him how little control he had over the storm raging outside. Hunter sat in the back, pressed against Lena, his ears twitching every time the wind howled. The faint smell of blood still hung in the cabin. Daniel glanced at Lena. She was pale, her lips trembling, but her eyes were open, fighting to stay awake. "You're losing a lot of blood," Daniel said, trying to keep his tone calm. "Stay with me. We're not far from town." Lena shook her head weakly. "No, you don't understand." Daniel shot her a quick look, then back at the road. "What do you mean?" Her breath came in shallow bursts. For a moment he thought she might pass out. Then, almost in a whisper, she said, "I'm not the only one." Daniel frowned. "What are you talking about?" "There are more girls," Lena said. Her voice cracked, not from the cold, but from something heavy of fear. "6 others, they're still out there." Daniel's chest tightened. "Where?" "A warehouse near the border," Lena said, swallowing hard. "They keep us there, locked up. Guards always watching. I only escaped because they moved me, said I was too much trouble." Her eyes glistened, though no tears came. Maybe the storm had stolen them, or maybe she had run out long before tonight. Daniel slowed the SUV slightly, his mind racing. A human trafficking ring. 6 more captives. This wasn't just a rescue anymore, it was something far bigger. He glanced in the rearview mirror. "You're telling me there's an operation running near here, and they've got 6 girls locked in a warehouse?" "Yes," Lena whispered, "all from different places. Some younger than me." She trailed off, shaking her head as if she couldn't bring herself to finish. "You don't know what they do to us." Hunter gave a low growl. Sensing her distress, he pressed his head lightly against her arm. For the first time since they'd pulled her from the trap, Lena almost smiled, almost Daniel forced his voice steady. Do you know where exactly? She hesitated. Northfall border crossing. About 5 miles out, old lumber warehouse. They use it because no one checks that place anymore. Daniel cursed under his breath. That warehouse had been shut down for years. He'd driven past it dozens of times, never thinking twice. Who's running this? Daniel asked. Lena's eyes darted toward the window, though all she could see was snow. Men from across the border. Some locals, too. They pay people to look away. Daniel's jaw tightened, including law enforcement. Her silence was enough of an answer. For a moment, the only sound inside the SUV was the hum of the heater struggling against the storm. Daniel's stomach churned. If what she said was true, this wasn't something the Silver Creek Department could handle alone. It was bigger, dirtier, and if there were cops or officials already on someone's payroll, calling it in could mean tipping off the trafficker. Lena stirred, her voice suddenly urgent. Please, you can't just drop me at a hospital. They'll find me. They always do. You don't understand how far this goes. Daniel looked at her in the rearview mirror. Her face was ghostly pale, but her eyes were locked on his with fierce desperation. I promised you I'd get you out alive, he said. That hasn't changed, but I need you to trust me. She nodded faintly, though fear still clung to her expression. Hunter shifted, letting out a sharp bark. Daniel's eyes flicked to the rearview mirror again. Nothing but white snow behind them, but Hunter wasn't barking at the storm. He was warning. Daniel pressed harder on the gas. They needed to get off the back road and into town before anyone caught up. Tell me everything, Daniel said, voice firm. Names, faces, anything you remember. Lena shook her head slowly. I don't know their names. They never told us, but there's one man's scar on his cheek, left side. He was the one in charge when I escaped. If he finds out I'm alive, she trailed off, shivering, not from the cold this time. Daniel nodded, absorbing every detail. He didn't have a full picture, but he had enough to know he was now neck-deep in something that went beyond Northfall, beyond his badge. Hunter barked again, but softer this time, like a reminder rather than a warning. Daniel reached over and patted the dashboard. We'll make it, he muttered, more to himself than anyone else. Lena leaned back, her voice barely audible. You shouldn't have saved me. Daniel's grip on the wheel tightened. That's not how I'm wired. Silence filled the SUV, heavy and suffocating. The storm outside was loud, but inside, it was Lena's confession that roared the loudest. By the time the faint glow of Northfall's lights shimmered in the distance, Daniel knew two things for certain. Lena was telling the truth, and this wasn't going to end with one rescue. The storm they were driving through was nothing compared to what waited on the other side, and yet, as Hunter settled against Lena, as if guarding her with his very life, Daniel felt the weight of his decision. He could walk away, hand her off to someone else, pretend it wasn't his fight, but deep down he already knew. This was his fight now. The SUV pushed on through the snow, headlights cutting a fragile path forward, and somewhere beyond the border, 6 girls waited in the dark. The headlights in the rearview mirror cut through the storm like the eyes of a predator. Daniel felt his stomach drop. He had been expecting it. Hunter's warning bark wasn't wrong. Now the enemy was here, pushing closer with every second. The SUV jolted as Daniel pressed harder on the gas. Snow sprayed up from the tires, the vehicle fishtailing before he regained control. The road ahead wasn't really a road anymore, just a white blur broken by dark patches of pine trees. Hold on, Daniel muttered, more to himself than to Lena. She was slumped against the back seat, her face ghostly under the dim cabin light. Hunter crouched beside her, his body stiff, ears pinned back. He growled low, staring at the rear window as if he could already see the men inside the pursuing vehicle. The enemy car closed the distance, its headlights bouncing wildly in the storm. Daniel knew the terrain well enough to understand how dangerous this was. One wrong turn, one hidden ditch, and his SUV would be on its side in the snow. He steered sharply to the right, the tires grinding against packed ice. For a second, the SUV tilted, and Lena gasped, but Daniel pulled it back under control and sped toward a logging trail that wound between the trees. The pursuing car followed, headlights slicing through the falling snow. Damn it, Daniel hissed. They're not backing off. Hunter barked sharply, almost as if agreeing. The trail narrowed, branches slapping against the SUV's sides. Snow dumped off the trees in heavy clumps, blinding Daniel for moments at a time. He leaned forward, eyes straining, every nerve lit up. A sharp pop cracked through the storm. Hunter reacted instantly, his head jerked, and he barked furiously. The smell hit next. Faint but undeniable gunpowder, shots fired. Daniel muttered under his breath. He ducked lower instinctively, his eyes flicking between the road and the rearview mirror. Another pop. A round whizzed past, tearing into the snowbank just behind the SUV. "They're shooting at us," Daniel said flatly. Though Lena was too weak to respond, he jerked the wheel hard to the left, forcing the SUV off the narrow trail and into deeper snow. The vehicle shuddered, tires spinning before catching again. Behind them, the headlights swerved, the other car grinding to keep up. Daniel's mind raced. The storm was his only advantage. These men weren't used to Northford's back. If he could lose them in the forest, the blizzard might do the rest. But the downside was obvious: one bad move, and he'd strand all three of them in sub-zero conditions with no backup. Hunter barked again, claws scraping against the window. He could sense the gunfire, the danger pressing in. His body language told Daniel one thing clearly: fight or run, but don't stop. The enemy vehicle drew closer. Through the blur of snow, Daniel could just make out its shape: and old pickup, powerful, but not built for precision in terrain like this. Its headlights glared in the mirror, bright enough to blind. "All right," Daniel muttered. "Let's see how much you know about these roads." He spun the wheel, bearing onto another trail that cut uphill. The SUV groaned under the strain, tires digging into ice. For a second, Daniel thought it might stall, but then it surged forward, climbing higher into the forest. The pickup followed, engine roaring. Another shot cracked the night. This one hit closer. Metal pinged off the rear bumper. Hunter barked frantically, teeth bared. Daniel pushed harder, forcing the SUV into higher gears. The climb grew steeper. Daniel's eyes flicked to Lena. She was awake, barely whispering something he couldn't hear. He didn't have time to ask. He needed both hands, both eyes. All focus on the storm and the men trying to kill them. The trail leveled off, opening into a ridge where the wind screamed louder than ever. Snow whipped across the ground in sheets, erasing any sign of the path. Daniel's headlights struggled to keep the way clear. Come on," he whispered to the SUV as if it were alive. Behind him, the pickup slid dangerously, almost veering into the trees before correcting. They were relentless. Whoever these men were, they weren't planning on letting him go. Daniel's jaw tightened. He knew this ridge. Ahead, the trail split. One path led down toward a frozen creek, nearly impassable in this weather. The other cut through a tight grove of trees, barely wide enough for a vehicle. It was a gamble either way. He took the grove. The SUV scraped against bark, branches clawing at the sides like fingers. Snow dumped onto the windshield, forcing him to flick the wipers to their fastest setting. He leaned into the wheel, forcing the vehicle through. The pickup tried to follow. Daniel heard it crunch against the trees, metal groaning, headlights jerking wildly as it struggled to fit too wide. Daniel muttered, a grim satisfaction tugging at the corners of his mouth. Hunter barked, ears twitching toward the sound of grinding metal behind them. The pursuing headlights faltered, then disappeared into the storm. Daniel didn't slow down. Not yet. He pushed through the grove until the trees opened into another trail that wound downhill. Only when he was certain the pickup hadn't broken free did he finally ease his foot off the gas. The SUV coasted, tires crunching over fresh snow. His hands trembled slightly on the wheel, though he forced them steady. Hunter moved to the rear window, peering out, growling low in his throat. "They'll try again," Daniel said, mostly to himself. "They're not done." He checked on Lena, her eyes flooded open, her voice hoarse. "They'll keep coming," she whispered. Daniel nodded grimly. "I know." The storm thickened, swallowing the trail ahead. For now, they had distance. But the pursuit wasn't over. The men in that pickup weren't amateurs. They had guns, determination, and something to lose. And Daniel knew exactly what that meant. They wouldn't stop until they got Lena back. Hunter winced softly, pressing his head against Daniel's shoulder for a moment before returning to his watch. He had smelt the gunpowder. He had heard the round snap through the air. To him, this wasn't over either. Daniel pressed on through the storm, the SUV carving a fragile line of survival across the frozen wilderness. Every gust of wind sounded like another engine behind them. Every shadow of a tree looked like headlights in the distance. He tightened his grip on the wheel. He couldn't let the fear sink in. Not now. Not with Lena in the back and 6 more lives hanging on whatever choices he made next. The storm roared, and the chase faded behind them. But Daniel knew one truth. This was just the first round. The storm had eased slightly by the time Daniel pulled the SUV into the dim lot of a roadside rest stop. The neon sign above the convenience store flickered, half dead from the wind and snow. It wasn't much, but it was the first sign of shelter since the chase. He killed the engine, the silence inside the SUV almost deafening after hours of tires grinding against snow. Lena stirred in the back seat, her face pale, eyes glassy with exhaustion. Hunter pressed close to her, his body heat keeping her warm. Daniel leaned back in his seat, running a hand across his face. He needed gas, food, maybe a first aid kit to stop the bleeding until he could get Lena somewhere safe. But more than anything, he needed to think. "Stay with her," he said quietly to Hunter, who responded with a soft whine. Daniel stepped out, boots crunching into the snow. The wind cut into him instantly, carrying the faint scent of diesel and wood smoke from somewhere nearby. He pulled his jacket tighter and walked toward the store. Inside, the lights buzzed overhead, casting a harsh glow on the aisles of canned goods and cheap coffee. A man behind the counter glanced up, his eyes narrowing slightly at Daniel's badge clipped to his belt. "Rough night," the clerk said, voice flat. "Yeah," Daniel replied. He grabbed bandages, antiseptic, and bottled water. He didn't want to stay long. As he paid, headlights washed over the lot outside. Another vehicle pulled in, an old cruiser, the kind used by the North Falls Sheriff's Department. Daniel felt his chest tighten. The door opened, and a uniformed deputy stepped inside, brushing snow from his shoulders. His nameplate read Morris. Daniel recognized him, maybe late 20s. Eager to please when Daniel had last seen him in town. "Walker," Morris said with a stiff smile. "Didn't expect to see you out here tonight, Patrol," Daniel answered, keeping his tone casual. Morris's eyes flicked to the items on the counter. Bandages, antiseptic, too much for a normal patrol. His smile didn't fade, but it didn't feel real either. "Storm was bad," Morris said, stepping closer. "Dangerous to be out." Daniel gave a small nod, sliding the supplies into a bag. His instincts buzzed. Something in Morris's tone wasn't right. It was too smooth, too measured. "You out here alone?" Morris asked. "Yeah," Daniel lied. Hunter's bark echoed faintly from the SUV. Sharp and protective, Morris's gaze shifted toward the sound, his smile faltering just slightly. "You should probably head back into town," Morris said after a pause. "Safer there." Daniel forced a neutral expression. "Appreciate the advice." He brushed past, bag in hand, but every nerve in his body screamed. Maurice had been probing, fishing for information, and the way he looked toward the SUV, Daniel had seen that look before. It wasn't concern, it was recognition. Back in the vehicle, Daniel set the bag down and checked on Lena. She was awake enough to whisper. "Who was that?" "Deputy," Daniel muttered. He didn't want to alarm her, but the unease in his stomach wouldn't leave. "Get some rest." Hunter hadn't calmed down. He sat upright, eyes locked on the convenience store, body rigid. A low growl rumbled in his throat. Daniel started the engine, but he didn't pull out immediately. Through the falling snow, he saw Morris step back outside. The deputy didn't get into his cruiser right away. Instead, he pulled out a phone, turning slightly away as he spoke into it. Daniel's pulse quickened. He knew that posture. A quick call. No radio, no official report. This wasn't procedure. This was communication off the books. He put the SUV into gear, keeping his eyes on Morris. As the vehicle rolled past, Daniel caught enough of Morris's expression to confirm his suspicion. The young deputy wasn't surprised to see him alive. He was annoyed. Back on the road, the storm swallowed them again, but Daniel's thoughts were sharper than the wind. Someone in uniform was already on the other side. Maybe more than one. Lena's voice was faint but steady. "He's with them, isn't he?" Daniel hesitated before answering. "Yep. Looks that way." She closed her eyes, a shiver running through her. "I told you, they pay people off. Doesn't matter if they wear a badge." Daniel gripped the wheel tighter. He had always known corruption was possible, but seeing it so close to home cut deeper than he expected. The uniform was supposed to mean something. For men like Maurice, it was just another mask. Hunter rested his head on Daniel's shoulder for a moment, as if sensing the weight in his chest. Daniel didn't push him away. The town's glow shimmered faintly on the horizon, but Daniel no longer saw it as safe. If Maurice was compromised, others could be too. The department, the sheriff, maybe even the border agents. He couldn't trust anyone now. For the first time, the scale of what he was facing sank in. He wasn't just fighting traffickers in the woods, he was fighting a network, a system that stretched into the very people who should have had his back. The SUV rumbled on through the storm. Daniel's face was set, jaw tight. He was on his own. But as Hunter shifted in the back seat, curling protectively against Lena, Daniel knew on his own wasn't entirely true. It was him, the dog, and the girl, against the storm, against the men hunting them, against the shadows hiding behind a badge, and he would fight, because no one else would. The snow thickened again as Daniel steered the SUV toward the northern edge of North Fort. The headlights barely pierced through the white curtain, but Lena sat upright in the back seat, her weak hand resting against the glass. as if guiding them. "It's close," she whispered, her breath fogging the window. "Past the ridge. There's an old lumberyard. That's where they keep the others." Daniel nodded, eyes walked on the road. He didn't need details about the yard. He'd been near it years ago when the mill shut down. A wide warehouse, rusted siding, broken windows. A perfect place to vanish from sight. "Tell me how you got out," Daniel said. Lena swallowed, her voice thin but steady. "They moved me 2 nights ago, said I wasn't worth keeping. One man walked me to a truck. I fought him, bit his arm, and ran. The storm covered my tracks. I don't think they expected me to make it far." Hunter's ears flicked at her words. He whined softly, almost as if acknowledging the fight she had survived. Daniel's jaw tightened. They'll be on edge now. Losing one means the others are guarded even tighter. The SUV crested the ridge, its tires crunching against ice from the hilltop. Daniel killed the headlights and coasted slowly to a stop. He cut the engine. Silence dropped like a hammer, broken only by the wind tearing across the trees. "There," Lena whispered, pointing. Through the snow and dark, the faint outline of the warehouse emerged, a massive rectangle of shadow, its roof sagging under years of neglect. But what struck Daniel wasn't the building, it was the glow. A dull orange light pulsed from gaps in the siding, flickering like a furnace. Hunter shifted in the back seat, a growl low in his throat. Daniel scanned the yard. 2 vehicles sat parked outside, a black SUV and a pickup, both dusted with snow but clearly used recently. Fresh tire tracks led straight to the doors. "Number of guards?" Daniel asked quietly. "Always at least 3, Lena said. "Sometimes more. They take turns watching us." Her voice cracked. "I can still hear them laughing." Daniel felt the weight of her words settle deep. He reached back, resting a hand briefly on her shoulder. "Not tonight. Tonight they don't laugh." He opened the glove box and pulled out a flashlight and spare ammo. His service pistol sat holstered at his hip, but it wasn't enough for a direct fight. Not with multiple armed men inside. The plan had to be smart, fast. He crouched against the SUV, Hunter pressing close. The dog's breath steamed in the cold, his eyes fixed on the warehouse. Every line in his body screamed focus. "All right," Daniel whispered. "We get closer. Stay low. I need to know how many before I move." Lena shifted, wincing as her injured leg protested. "I can show you where they keep us," she said, nodding toward the far end of the building. "There's a small side door. That's how I got out." Daniel glanced at her, weighing risk against necessity. She was hurt, but she knew more than he did. He nodded once. "Stay behind me. Hunter will stay between us." They moved slowly, crunching through the snow, each step swallowed by the storm. The wind worked in their favor, covering sound, masking their approach. Daniel crouched near a stack of rotted lumber, raising his binoculars. Through the shifting snow, shapes moved inside a warehouse, shadows against the glow. He counted to by the main door, rifles slung across their chests. Another passed by a broken window, pacing. "That made 3. Same as you said," Daniel murmured to Lena. "But there could be more inside." Lena hugged herself, eyes wide as she stared at the warehouse. "They don't stay quiet for long. Listen." Daniel held his breath. At first, only the wind filled his ears. Then it came faint but sharp, a gunshot, not aimed outward, from inside. Hunter stiffened, growl rising. Daniel grabbed his collar, steadying him. The gunshot was followed by shouting, muffled voices, harsh and urgent. Then another crack, louder this time, echoing through the lumberyard. Lena flinched, tears brimming in her eyes. That's what it was like, all the time. Daniel's blood ran cold. He knew what the sound meant. Intimidation, control. They were firing weapons inside, maybe to scare the captives, maybe worse. "We don't have time," Daniel said firmly. He scanned the perimeter again. 2 at the door, 1 pacing inside, more beyond that. He turned to Lena. "That side entrance, you're sure it's still clear?" She nodded quickly. "Yes, they don't watch it. It's where they dragged supplies in. If we can get there," Daniel exhaled. "Decision made. That's our way in." Hunter pressed forward, ears perked, every muscle coiled. The dog was ready, sensing the danger ahead. Daniel looked back toward the SUV, then at Lena. "This is it," he said quietly. "We move now, before more arrive. Once we're inside, there's no turning back." Another gunshot ripped through the night. Closer this time. The storm seemed to swallow it instantly, but the echo lingered in Daniel's chest. He tightened his grip on his weapon. The warehouse loomed ahead, a black mouth ready to consume them. But somewhere inside, 6 girls were waiting. "Stay close," Daniel whispered. "And whatever happens, don't stop moving." With Hunter leading low to the ground and Lena behind him, Daniel stepped out from cover. The snow closed around them like a curtain, hiding their approach, and in the heart of the storm, the warehouse waited, alive with shadows and the faint, broken sound of forgotten cries. The storm outside raged with unrelenting force, snow hammering against the corrugated walls of the warehouse. Inside, the air was just as cold, but heavy with the metallic scent of oil, rust, and fear. Daniel pressed his back against a stack of wooden crates, his breath fogging in the faint light seeping through broken windows. Beside him, Lena crouched low, her face pale, eyes wide, clutching the old revolver he had handed her. Hunter growled, ears pricked, every muscle coiled like a spring. The shepherd knew what Daniel knew. The moment they moved, bullets would fly. From deeper inside the warehouse, muffled cries and soft sobbing drifted out. 6 young girls still trapped, their voices swallowed by the storm. Daniel's stomach clenched. He couldn't let this place remain their tomb. But the gang was ready. Shadows moved across the catwalks above, boots clanging softly. The click of a rifle bolt echoed like a countdown. They had been waiting. A flashlight beam cut through the dark, sweeping across the crates. Daniel didn't hesitate. He raised his pistol and fired once. The light dropped, and a shout followed. Chaos erupted. Gunfire exploded from both sides. Sharp cracks and deafening echoes bouncing off metal walls. Bullets splintered wood inches from Daniel's head. He pulled Lena down, shielding her as Hunter lunged forward with a savage bark. Teeth bared, one man rushed around the crates, shotgun raised. Hunter struck first, slamming into him with sheer force, knocking him backward. The shotgun discharged into the ceiling, showering sparks. The man screamed as Hunter's jaws clamped on his arm. Daniel pivoted, firing twice. The thug dropped. Hunter snarled, shaking loose, then darted back to Daniel's side, chest heaving, eyes burning with instinct. The warehouse became a killing ground. Shadows darted, muzzle flashes lit up the rafters. Daniel fired carefully, counting each bullet, every pull of the trigger a choice. He clipped one man on the catwalk, watched him tumble into the darkness below. But the enemy wasn't just reckless muscle, they were organized. 2 men tried to flank him from the right, moving low and fast. Daniel dragged Lena to another stack of barrels, motioning for silence. She clutched the revolver so tightly her knuckles turned white. A voice rang out in the chaos, "You're too late, cop. None of them are leaving here alive." Daniel's jaw tightened. He leaned out and fired at the source of the voice. His bullet struck sparks from a metal post, forcing the thug to duck. The back door burst open with a bang, snow swirling in as 3 more men entered. They carried rifles, silhouetted against the storm outside. Daniel cursed under his breath. He was being pushed deeper inside, cut off from the exit. Hunter barked, running ahead. He lunged at one of the newcomers, teeth sinking into a thigh. The man shrieked, firing wildly into the ceiling before crashing to the ground. The others fired at Hunter, but Daniel was already moving. He sprinted from cover, pistol blazing. One man went down with a shot to the chest. The other staggered as Daniel tackled him, slamming him hard into the concrete floor. The rifle skidded across the ground. Daniel slammed his fist into the thug's jaw, then his throat. He didn't have time for hesitation. The man went limp. When he looked up, Hunter stood panting, muzzle stained red, but alive. Through the firefight, Daniel caught sight of a locked steel door at the far end. Behind it, the cries of the captives grew louder. Panicked by the noise of battle, Lena stayed down. Daniel shouted, crawling low to the door. Bullets sparked off the wall as he forced himself closer. He reached the lock and fired twice into the heavy chain. The steel shattered, the door creaked open, and terrified eyes peered out. 6 young girls, no older than 15, huddled together. Their faces were streaked with tears and dirt. "Stay inside until I tell you," Daniel ordered. His voice was sharp, commanding, but his eyes softened for just a moment. They nodded, clinging to each other. The gang was furious now. Shouts echoed, boots thundered as more men poured down from the catwalks. Daniel and Hunter stood their ground, trading fire. Shell casings clattered around their feet, smoke and the smell of gunpowder choking the air. A thug tossed a flare across the floor. It lit the warehouse in a hellish red glow, shadows stretching long and jagged. The snow outside, visible through the cracks in the walls, glowed crimson. Daniel felt his arms ache, his ears ringing. He reloaded quickly, fingers numb. Another gunman advanced, rifle steady. Daniel ducked, returned fire, and dropped him with a shot through the shoulder. Hunter attacked again, leaping onto a man trying to sneak up from behind. The shepherd's jaws closed on the man's neck. Daniel turns just in time to see the thug collapse under Hunter's weight. But there were too many. A bullet tore past Daniel's shoulder, grazing flesh. Pain burned hot. He fell behind cover, clutching the wound. Blood seeped into his coat. "Daniel!" Lena screamed. She crawled to him, pressing her hands against the bleeding. "I'm fine," he grunted, though his vision blurred. He forced himself up, pistol raised once more. Minutes felt like hours. The storm outside howled, but inside the only sound was gunfire, screams, and hunters' growls. Bodies littered the concrete floor, blood mixing with melting snow blown in through the open doors. Finally, silence began to fall. The last two thugs broke and ran, disappearing into the blizzard. Daniel held his pistol steady, chest heaving, until he was sure they were gone. The warehouse reeked of smoke and blood. Daniel staggered to the steel door and pulled it wide. "It's over. You're safe now." The girls stumbled out, their steps hesitant. They looked at the carnage with wide, horrified eyes. One of them clutched Lena's hand, trembling. Daniel dropped to a knee, resting his hand on Hunter's neck. The dog was covered in scratches, his fur matted with blood not all his own. Hunter licked Daniel's glove, steady and loyal as ever, but Daniel's chest tightened. It wasn't a victory, it was survival at a cost. Too many had died tonight. Outside, the storm raged on, snow swallowing tracks and blood alike. The night wasn't finished with him yet. The first hint of daylight crept into the storm, faint streaks of gray slicing through the endless black. Snow still fell, but the blizzard had lost some of its fury. The wind no longer screamed and moaned, tired and low, as though the night itself had burned out. Daniel guided the truck slowly along the frozen road, headlights cutting tunnels through the white curtain. The engine groaned with each climb, tires slipping, but it kept moving. In the back seat, Lena sat with three of the rescued girls, blankets wrapped around their trembling shoulders. Their faces were pale, hollow, but alive. That was something. Hunter lay stretched across the floor, chest rising and falling, his fur still streaked with dried blood. His ears twitched at every sound, alert even in exhaustion. No one spoke for a long time. The storm had taken their voices. Only the rumble of the truck filled the silence. Daniel's hands gripped the steering wheel tight, knuckles pale. He kept scanning the horizon, even when there was nothing but snow. Every shadow looked like headlights. Every gust of wind sounded like an engine chasing them. Lena broke the silence first. Her voice was weak, almost drowned by the storm. "They were supposed to be 7, but we only found 4. Daniel didn't answer right away. His jaw clenched. He'd counted 2, 3 missing, 3 young lives still in the gang's hands. Lena lowered her gaze, guilt written across her face. "I should have remembered better." Maybe if Daniel cut her off, his tone firm. "Don't. You're here. They're alive because of you." The girls huddled closer together, listening, but saying nothing. Their silence spoke louder than words. Trauma had carved deep lines into their faces, even at their age. The road bent north, away from the border, into terrain Daniel knew well. He eased the truck over a ridge, slowing as his eyes caught movement in the mirror. A shape flicked far back, half swallowed by snow headlights, or just the storm playing tricks. Hunter growled low in his throat, confirming what Daniel feared. The gang hadn't given up. Not all of them had died in the warehouse, but no pursuit came. Not yet. Maybe they were regrouping. Maybe they were waiting. The uncertainty gnawed at him. Daniel pressed the accelerator, urging the truck forward. The storm thinned enough for the horizon to emerge, rolling white hills, stretching into a sky just beginning to bruise with light. Dawn wasn't here yet. After an hour, Daniel spotted an abandoned ranger station, little more than a cabin buried in snow. He pulled the truck off the road, tires crunching ice, and killed the engine. Silence fell heavy. Inside, the cabin smelled of dust and old wood. The girls huddled near the fireplace while Lena fumbled with matches, a weak flame court, spreading fragile warmth. Daniel checked Hunter's injuries, wiping blood from his fur with strips of cloth. The dog endured it silently, eyes fixed on the door. "You should rest too," Lena said softly, watching Daniel as he tied a crude bandage around his shoulder wound. He shook his head. "Not yet. We're not out of this." Her eyes flickered. "Do you think they'll come after us?" "They always do," Daniel replied. His tone wasn't dramatic, just certain. The fire crackled. The girls, exhausted, leaned against one another and drifted into uneasy sleep. For a brief moment, the cabin felt safe, insulated from the storm and the bloodshed behind them. Daniel stepped outside, leaving the door open just enough for Hunter to follow. The shepherd padded through the snow, sat at his side, and stared north. The horizon glowed faintly now. Light spread across the storm clouds, pale but unyielding. It was the promise of a day that hadn't fully arrived. Daniel's breath clouded the air, His eyes stayed fixed on the white expanse stretching into the distance. Somewhere out there, 3 girls were still missing. Somewhere out there, the gang was regrouping, nursing vengeance. His body ached, his mind screamed for rest. But his purpose cut through the exhaustion. This wasn't the end. It wasn't even close. He rested a hand on Hunter's neck. The shepherd leaned into him, silent, steady, both of them scarred, both unwilling to stop. Behind them, the firelight flickered through the cabin window. Ahead, the storm began to break, revealing a long road still buried in snow. Daniel narrowed his eyes at the horizon. The dawn wasn't here yet, but it was coming, and with it, another battle.